All right, welcome to the Risk Reversal Podcast. I'm Dan Nathan. That's Alex Sherman. He's the co-founder and CEO of Bluefish. Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, we met, I want to say, a month or two ago. Good friend of mine, Ann Bordutsky. She is at NEA. She's actually been an amazing, prolific investor in AI over the last few years. She led your Series A. Was that earlier this year? You guys raised $20 million, and
Yep.
she's the best. So she's always making some very nice introductions to
Ann
me.
is awesome.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. Ann, let's talk about Bluefish. We'll talk about what you guys are doing, who you are disrupting, who you're serving, and how I think e-commerce in general is just changing so dramatically. We see a lot of industries being disrupted by AI. We're going to talk a little bit about what it means, Agentic AI, whether we're seeing that as a real force in a whole host of different industries, but obviously e-commerce is a big one. And then you also have some interesting data from Black Friday, Small Business Saturday, Cyber Monday, maybe even Giving Tuesday, who knows? A lot going on there. But let's start with Bluefish. You are a multiple-time founder,
Yes.
and maybe we'll hit a little bit of that on the backside, maybe some advice you have to founders out there. But this is the one here where it seems like the timing is perfect for the business that you're building, the services that you're providing, and what's going on with the world, because the ground is moving below every industry's feet. What industry did you go out and take on, and are you looking to disrupt?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
I'm super pumped to be here. And yeah, a little bit about Bluefish. You can basically think about Bluefish as the marketing engine for the generative internet. And so simply put, our job is to help the largest brands in the world basically gain visibility and influence into how the major AI providers portray their products and services to consumers. So for example, when a consumer goes to ChatGPT, or they go to Google Gemini or AI Mode or Anthropic Claude or Amazon Rufus, every brand in the world wants to know, are we showing up? How are we described to those consumers? Are we recommended? You can think of it as basically the next chapter of search. And so our platform gives those marketing teams real-time insight and analytics into how they're showing up, how the models are learning about their brands and how they're portraying their products to those consumers, and tools to go and influence those outcomes. So figuring out what's driving the models, how are the models learning about their brands, what's informing the way that they characterize their products and services, and what sort of content can brands build in order to help teach those models more about their products and services.
Yeah, so when you talk about the generative internet, like let's take a step back to this old SEO world, right?
Right.
Like things have changed so quickly. So describe what marketing teams, how they were using search before and how it maybe is iterating right now and where you think it's going in the short term, because obviously your platform is giving these marketing teams tools, right, to do the things that to sell more products and services and the like. But it seems like the SEO model got turned off very, very quickly.
100%. So taking a step back, what happens on the internet that we've seen over the last 20 years is basically every 5 to 7 years, you have a new marketing channel that emerges. And it kind of plays out the same way every time. So if you think about the rise of search, the rise of social, the rise of mobile, what happens is there's a new technology that kind of changes the way that consumers interact with the internet. Marketers initially and brands don't really know what to make of it, right? Like remember when mobile came out, marketers were like, no one will ever shop on their phones. And when social came out, marketers were like, what is this thing? But what happens is as consumer adoption scales, it becomes really clear that that's where the eyeballs are going. And marketers realize that that is sort of a new surface for them to engage and interact with their customer. And you end up with a new marketing channel. That's basically what's happening with AI right now, but it's happened in this really compressed period where when we started Bluefish 2 years ago, there were platforms, of course, like ChatGPT and Perplexity that existed. But from a marketer's point of view, from a brand's point of view, they're relatively small, like tens of millions of consumers. But what happened next is that Microsoft launched their AI products, Google launched their AI products, Amazon launched theirs, Meta launched theirs, and in like a 6 to 12 month period of time, the entire consumer internet became the agentic internet. And consumers very quickly were trained on this better, faster, smarter way to navigate the internet, to discover products, to comparison shop, to figure out what to buy and where. And so marketers since then, the largest brands in the world, have basically been rebuilding the way that they think about marketing to catch up to this new shopping journey through AI. And so we work with search teams, we work with content, brand marketing, PR, and corp comms that all want to know, how are the major models describing us to those consumers? Are we showing up? Are we showing up positively, negatively? How are we compared to our competitors? And ultimately, what needs to be true in order for us to win in this new channel?
All right, so from a consumer standpoint, and we've all done it, right? So I have Perplexity, I have Gemini.
Yeah.
It used to be you'd go to the Google box and you'd say, I'm looking for whatever. You'd literally say best, 15-inch, laptop or something like that, and give you a bunch of blue links, right? So there's no context. So now if you do that, it's like talking to somebody, who's talking your language about that sort of thing. Now, obviously, if you spent more time with that LLM, it's going to get some behavior from you, that sort of thing. So it's like an experience that is, night and day from what we used to have. And so what are consumers dictating, I guess? You know what I'm saying? Like, because a lot of consumers are going to be slow to adopt this sort of thing. We're early adopters, right? I'm just curious, like, how you think of that in your platform, because obviously you're serving the marketing teams. That's how you get paid, but you need the other end of the trade.
Totally. I think what's happened actually is that consumers just love AI because it takes the complexity of that sort of manual keyword, 10 blue links kind of research project across the internet to find what you're looking for, and it completely collapses that funnel. It allows you to get to truth faster. Like, I think everyone who uses an AI platform has that experience of it's just a more convenient, faster way to get to the answer I'm looking for. And it does the same thing for shopping, by the way. So, you mentioned how personalized AI is. You can go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I'm training for a marathon. Mm-hmm. Here's the sort of runner I am. Here are the things I care about. Here's my budget. Go put together a list of like which products, which running sneakers I should look at. Tell me the strengths and weaknesses of each, and ultimately tell me which one to buy. And you can do that in 10 seconds. Mm-hmm. And so I think what's happened with consumers is that they've been trained very, very quickly that this is just the way they need to navigate the internet. And everyone else is racing to catch up to make sure that they're showing up positively in that kind of new consumer experience. I think for consumers, you're right that there are early adopters that have moved really quickly to adopt these new technologies. But actually what we've seen is that older generations as well are adopting it really, really quickly. Because if you think about it, my parents never actually really liked the sort of keyword 10 blue links version of the internet. That was never like a particularly fun process for them. They speak in natural language. They just want sort of an answer. They don't really want to be clicking through a dozen websites to find what they're, going through all of these ads to get to this sort of answer. And so the fact that ChatGPT condensed that into this really convenient turnkey experience has meant that older generations as well have adopted this really quickly. And so from a marketer's point of view, AI is the channel to chase after right now. And we're seeing this across pretty much every vertical category, from financial services to CPG, apparel. Every large brand is taking a good hard look at this new channel and thinking, how do we need to adjust our marketing strategies in order to capitalize on this new space?
Okay, let's talk about then these e-commerce platforms. We know who they are, right? So
Sure.
There was an article, I think it was in The Information, it was talking about Walmart today. I think a couple days ago was Amazon, how they're blocking some of these agents from coming from Google, right? And basically, I don't understand why they would be blocking them. You'd think that traffic into your e-commerce site or platform would be a good thing. People used to go to like Amazon and search for something and go find it somewhere else, right? That sort of thing. But why do you think Walmart and Amazon are unsure about e-commerce agents coming to their platform? When you think about it, they must be a disproportionate amount of the e-commerce that exists in the U.S. here. You'd think that they'd want as much traffic from these engines as possible.
Totally. So the thing that's different about AI versus the deployment of mobile or social or search is that all of those legacy channels, they took 3 or 4 years to compose and reach kind of cruising altitude. AI has reached cruising altitude in 12 months. And so everyone is a little bit on the back foot. So for example, if you look at Google was forced into the AI space because as soon as ChatGPT started to be adopted as quickly as it was an existential threat to them from a search point of view. And so you saw Google race to roll out their AI products. And it was a little bit of a mess. Like you had kind of
Barred
the AI
back in-
overview
yeah,
at the
it was-
top,
yeah.
you had the 10 blue links at the bottom. As a consumer, you were like, where am I supposed to look? How am I supposed to interact with this? And what's happening now is that we're going through the first holiday shopping season that is almost entirely powered by AI. And everyone is racing to figure out what does that actually mean for us. And so with the big retailers, the big e-commerce platforms, the last 4 or 5 days were basically like the Super Bowl. This is, consumers spend $1 trillion during the holiday shopping season. There are hundreds of billions of dollars of marketing budgets that are deployed in order to reach those shoppers. And at the same time, no one really knows what a sort of holiday shopping season that is powered by AI really means. So how do consumers go shopping for gifts using ChatGPT? What does that mean for Amazon Rufus? Where do they actually transact? Do they buy in AI? Do they visit a retailer website? And all of the sort of hundreds of millions of dollars of marketing budgets, the billions that have been spent over the last 72 hours to reach those shoppers, those budgets were built and designed in a previous version of the internet. They were typically planned 6 months ago, 12 months ago. And so I think this has been a really critical referendum for essentially, large retailers, large e-commerce platforms, large brands to figure out what is this new world. And so to your point, I think there are a lot of large platforms that are a little bit on the back foot where they're trying to make sure that they still have access to their customer base, that they can still play a role in informing and influencing that shopper journey, and that ultimately that transaction happens on their website.
Right.
But we think of AI as sort of a reshuffling of the deck, that this is sort of a new playing field. And if you look across the big tech companies, every single one of them is thinking, okay, what is our sort of new role in this new agentic internet? Do we play in the ad side? Do we play in the search side? Do we play in the B2B enterprise side? Are we a commerce provider? Like, what does all of that mean in an agentic internet? I think the rules are being rewritten as we speak, and you're seeing that play out in real time.
Right. And, you just mentioned like the Google, it seems like they were obviously defending their moat to some degree, right? They have a disproportionate amount of, search ad revenue, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, all right, so if we start putting contextual answers over here, the overviews, right? And people aren't clicking on the links, then we're not getting paid, right? And so obviously, we're going to see, some form of ad models on these LLMs at some point. It just seems like all at once, Gemini has a different narrative, right? They're doing a good job as far as what the product is, but you have to think there's going to be some cannibalization one way or another. So when you think about them and Meta, really, I think they're like 75, 80% of like online ad revenue between the two companies. That sound right-ish, maybe?
Yeah.
Now, this has been a huge business, though, for an Amazon, their ad business internally, right? Walmart, these are tens of billions of dollars, and it's pure margin for them. If you're already on their platform, and you're seeing these ads, and it encourages you to, buy or check this out, I mean, like you're getting paid, right, for that. So how do you think that? What do you think the evolution of that is? Because obviously, like we just said, we can agree that, there's a huge moat that to some degree Google has to defend, right? But they also have to change quick enough. And what does it mean, I guess, for a Walmart and an Amazon, because they have these high margin advertising businesses?
Yeah. So, when we look at a Google, for example, they have this fundamental math problem that they have to solve. So they do have the customer. They have the customer base. And for the sake of clarity, I don't really buy the like Google doomers, like death of search. Like, Google is a phenomenal company, and they have many talented people that work there, and we're seeing that with Gemini. So there's a lot that they are capable of figuring out. But the fundamental math problem that they had to resolve was our entire ad business was predicated on keyword 10 blue links. That's how we monetize those consumers. But if a consumer is basically just getting their answer at the top, and the sort of AI summary they're getting at the top doesn't really have ads, or even if it does, then we need to make with that summary at the top what we previously made with the 10 things below it. So how do we make with one what we were previously making with 10? You have seen that kind of play out on the Google SERP over the last 12 months with a variety of different experiments. And of course, like Google controls their ad business. So can they increase prices? Can they do things behind the scenes to kind of smooth things out? Of course. But what's happening right now is that Google is trying to figure out how to rebuild their advertising business within this agentic interface. Amazon has the same problem to solve because 12 months ago, you would go to Amazon, you go to shop, go to your sort of Amazon search, put it in, get your results page. That results page is heavily monetized with a variety of different retail media ad units. That is Amazon's high margin ad business that they use to subsidize infrastructure and logistics and shipping and low costs and everything. It is not a nice to have business. It is the existential kind of driver of their margin. And so right now, Amazon's business is transitioning from that traditional search paradigm into Amazon Rufus. And I think they've had I would say, the same sort of experience that a lot of AI providers have had, where they've taken sort of 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And so that being said, they are figuring it out. And I think you're already starting to see ads show up in Rufus as Amazon is starting to think, okay, what is the right way for us to monetize this new agentic shopping experience for all of the brands that sell through, Rufus? How do we create more engagement with this AI product? So, for example, when Rufus started, it was like this tiny little chat box that was sort of in the corner. It was like a nice to have. It was an experiment. You're going to see Rufus become more and more the centerpiece. The Walmart CTO last year basically said that over the next few years, they want to replace their entire search engine with an AI agent. Walmart has a habit of saying things like that, 3 years before they actually do something about it. But I think every large retailer is going to basically be on the same journey, where they need to meet the shopper where they are, give them the sort of AI tools of convenience, and then make sure that all of their sort of retail media revenue follows the consumer into that new experience.
All right, let's define this for a second from a consumer, perspective, right? So, an agent versus just going to a chat, experience, an LLM, right? I mean, they're 2 very different sorts of things, right? So, like, you keep hearing this experience or this example where, okay, so you want to plan this trip and you want to go skiing, right? And you're going to use this agent, and it's going to basically, it's going to get you your flights and your hotel and your ski school and your rental this and your rental car and this and whatever. And, I just think that we're like probably 10 years away from people trusting and whatever. Maybe it's 3, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 10.
It's something.
You know what I mean? It's something. It's not in 2026, right? And we can get to enterprise in a minute, but from a consumer experience, it just seems like we're so far away from that. And then right now we're like at this fever pitch of excitement about all of these tools and, the folks, technologists and the like, and they're going to tell you don't understand like this. And I think I do understand. I think you're full of shit, not you, Sherman, like you're full of shit. You have to justify this huge build that you're doing, right? And you're going to have to convince us that you're going to use all this stuff. How far are we away from you putting your kid's Christmas list into an LLM, you know what I mean, saying, go buy these things and have them sent here by December 23rd and, all that sort of stuff. Like,
totally.
It just doesn't seem like logical anytime soon.
Yeah, I think, so usually what you see in these sorts of channels is that, consumers are sort of creatures of convenience. Like, we will happily do anything if it is cheaper, if it is faster, if it's smarter. We're very quick to sort of pick up new tools and say, remember when like Uber came out and it was like this sort of transformative thing and they had this viral adoption because all of a sudden consumers were like, I don't need to wait for a car, I can just pull out my phone. And so I think you're having that consumer moment in AI where they're really sort of learning, well, actually, I don't have to crisscross the internet. I can just get the answer. I can plan that, that ski trip and have all of the logistics planned for me. What is going to slow it down, though, is that there are these rules of gravity. There is all of this infrastructure that needs to be rebuilt. So, for example, if an AI agent goes and plans that trip for you, how does it actually book the trip? What is the handshake between that AI agent and Delta Airlines? What is the handshake between the ski school? How does it actually plug into your calendar? There's a lot of sort of, and I'll use this term broadly, infrastructure that needs to be built in order for a lot of this consumer experience to be actualized. And I think, to Amazon's credit, that is one of the things that they are, that they have as an advantage going into this space, right? So if ChatGPT ultimately wants the consumer transaction to live within ChatGPT, all right, they got to figure out how shipping works. Right. They got to figure out how logistics and warehouses work. And if they're going to push that back onto the retailers, then they have a whole set of other problems that they need to figure out. And so I think what usually happens is that you get this initial hype cycle where it becomes really clear where the puck is going, but then it takes a few years for the back end to catch up. And I think we're running into that with AI. That being said, I think, it was Black Friday last week, Cyber Monday this week. I think what we have seen, though, is that the consumer has moved into this new paradigm. And so going into 2026, you are going to see every large brand, every large retailer, every large e-commerce company, every large tech company realize that this is the new paradigm and they need to rebuild sort of the back end in order to support it. And I think you'll be surprised at how quickly that composes over 2026. I do agree with you, though, that there is sort of, there's a bit of a fever pitch kind of hype cycle around AI that is used to justify, these massive kind of infrastructure investments. And do we tend to sort of get ahead of our skis in those moments as an economy? Yeah, it always happens. You've seen it play out many times before. And so do I think that maybe there will be some pullback? Likely.
Yeah.
But I think that's okay. That's how these new sort of channels emerge.
Yeah. And so in market cap terms, if you think about it, since ChatGPT's launched 3 years ago, you saw the hyperscalers, NVIDIA, obviously a handful, of other like hardware-ish related sort of infrastructure plays that have accrued most of the market cap. In the private markets, you've seen OpenAI, you've seen Anthropic, there's a whole host of others. I mean, that combined is like $1 trillion in value, right? If you think about it. And so then there's companies like yours that are 2 years old, and you're probably to some degree being really smart about how you're allocating the capital that you because you realize, you look out there and you say, we're going to be able to take advantage of a lot of stuff that becomes commoditized, right? So a company like yours is going to be able to benefit as all these other industries kind of figure some of this stuff out, as you just described there. I'm just curious, as you think about it, what are some of the mistakes in 2026 some of these brands are going to make as they think about using an engine like yours, and what the return on that investment is going to be, and where they believe, like obviously you just used that term, skating where the puck is going. It just feels like we haven't heard too many cautionary tales just yet. What are some of the pitfalls you think?
Yeah, so Bluefish just released our first Black Friday AI shopping insights report, where we basically analyzed tens of millions of AI responses in response to shopping queries. So consumers looking to purchase within a particular category. And our engine analyzed all of those responses to basically pick out who are the winners and losers of this Black Friday that is powered by AI. And one of the things that we saw in this report was that the winners in AI and the losers in AI are sometimes very different than the winners and losers on the traditional internet. That we saw, brands and different categories portrayed to consumers by ChatGPT and the other AI providers in ways that were fundamentally different than the way that those brands were portrayed on like legacy search. And so going back to your question, I think that what you'll see in 2026 is a bit of a space race between the big brands to move quickly and get serious about managing their AI performance. The consumer's already there, and now those brands need to catch up. And they need to figure out, okay, if I'm in a commodity category, if I'm neck and neck with 2 or 3 other competitors in a particular product category, I need to make sure that ChatGPT knows why to recommend my product versus theirs to a consumer that's in market. And if the model is learning from our website, I need to make sure that that content is optimized for those models. If it's learning from third-party websites, maybe I need to go do some partnerships with Reddit or with NerdWallet or another kind of paid editorial blog. I think what you're seeing again is this sort of reshuffling of the deck. And going into 2026, the winners will be retooling for AI. And I think the rest will be a bit passengers for the ride, where they're still taking kind of a wait and see approach, and they just will be less in the driver's seat. And our job as Bluefish is to partner with the largest brands in the world to make sure that they are back in the driver's seat with AI, that they are influencing and informing their own destiny in this new channel, and can actually make sure that they are represented positively, accurately to those consumers in AI.
Yeah, so year over year, so you have this data now that obviously going to be tracking for a very long time, and I'm sure a lot of your customers are going to be really interested in seeing some trends. Did you see any retailers that had like a sort of Sydney Sweeney effect? You know what I mean? Like there was something that was kind of unexpected, and then all of a sudden, like, whoa, something just clicked because this new channel is resonating in a way, or just the whole thing coming together in a way they could not have seen 2 years ago based on their prior marketing spends and how they kind of would attack a period like this.
For sure. So I think what we're seeing is that the content and data that large language models respond to is not always the same thing that search algorithms responded to. So, for example, when we ranked retailers across apparel, across computers, across home appliances, many different categories, Best Buy came out on top by a long sort of stretch. And the reason is because the LLMs were heavily reliant on Best Buy's content on their website to inform the way that they described products to shoppers within those categories. And so there was something about the content and copy on their website, on those product detail pages, that the models really gravitated towards. And so anytime there's sort of a learning or an insight like that, what tends to happen is that all the other players within that category look to see, okay, well, what did they get right? How do we need to change our approach? What needs to be true in order for the models to pull from our content? And so, yeah, you're seeing, pretty heavy disruption across different categories based on what the models are gravitating towards. And that's kind of what I mean by space race, where I think the largest brands in the world are realizing that ultimately their job, yes, of course, it's to reach consumers, but now they have a new stakeholder, which are the large language models themselves. That if they want the LLMs and AI providers that are built on top of them to represent them more positively, they need to make sure that those models are getting what they need in terms of content, in terms of data. And so that's what you're going to see in 2026. You know that AI is sort of non-deterministic and it is hyper-personalized, hyper-individualized. So you and I could ask the same question of ChatGPT and get completely different responses. Like if you type in, hey, I'm training for a marathon, what are the best sneakers? And I do the same thing, ChatGPT is going to look at all of my history with OpenAI, all of the preferences that I've expressed. It's going to look at demographic details. It's going to do the same thing for you, and it's going to have a much more personalized recommendation to you versus for me. And so one of the things that's forcing brands to do is really think about okay, who is our customer? And when they create that content on their website, on those product detail pages, the days of having kind of one size fits all product detail information to train the models are over, right? Like the average product detail page probably has 300, 400 words on it that are one size fits all for every single type of shopper. But an LLM probably needs 100, 1,000 times that in order to really figure out how can it have a conversation with you or with me to explain the merits, the use cases, the benefits of a particular sneaker. And so one of the things that we spend a lot of time tracking is how does AI performance differ across different customer personas, and what are the implications from an optimization point of view for those brands? Are they telling the right story to models to enable them to tell sort of a story to one customer segment that meets their needs and a different story to another that meets a completely different set of buying criteria?
What do you make of this Sam Altman memo that came out earlier in the week? And
the red alert,
the code red. And it's interesting as a founder, couple time founder. I'm sure you've learned a whole heck of a lot. You know what I mean, about the products that you're building and how they're perceived and how they're received and the way you're, all your stakeholders feel about it. He knows when he writes a memo like that, it's going out to the world, right? And he knows that everything he does or says is under, a microscope. When you see a founder like Sam Altman write a memo like that to the world, what does it make you think about what you're building?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's sort of an expression up or out, and I feel like that definitely applies to AI, and it's forcing everyone to kind of move at the same speed. And so you're seeing this with all of the kind of model companies, where as soon as one sort of ducks left, they all have to sort of tack at the same in kind of the same way. That being said, what I will tell you as a repeat founder is that whenever you see a whole market prioritize speed over everything else, you just know in the back of your mind that that's creating debt. It's creating this sort of quiet, silent debt that is compounding over time. And at some point, that debt needs to be paid down. And I work in sort of Silicon Valley. We work in kind of these tech cycles that are fast and furious. And, our job is to go build generational companies really, really quickly with the best teams, the best technology, the best investors. But at the same time, if you actually want to build a durable company, you need to think about sort of building the engine behind the business. You need to think about the fundamentals. I would say, in our market, investors tend to swing from valuing speed and top line growth above all else. And then when the bubble starts to crack a little bit, then all of a sudden investors really care about profitability and efficiency. And so there's this kind of ping ponging between those paradigms. My job as a CEO and as a founder of a company and the leader of a team is to make sure we don't get caught in either of those extremes. That are we moving really fast? Are we building for the future? Of course. AI is happening at lightning speed, and it's our job to stay on top of that. But at the same time, our customers are the largest blue chip brands in the world. Ultimately, they're reliant on us for stability. Like, we're there to be their long-term partner, not this like flash in a pan. And so because Bluefish focuses on being this kind of, marketing platform for the largest enterprises in the world, we need to focus just as much on stability and making sure that no matter what happens in this AI market, whether it's a bubble, whether it's not a bubble, we will be their partner for decades to come. And that really changes the way you think about building a business.
Right.
Sure.
And it's not one of those things like if there was like, let's say a recession, for instance, companies obviously pull back in their marketing spend, but they can't probably afford in this environment to pull back from services like yours that help them make better decisions. Right. And that's actually something that, these different tech cycles will kind of say that this is what they do, but like, especially when it comes to marketing dollars, that's like a different, help us just think about that really quickly. Because to me, that's something that if you're building a durable company and a durable service, it should be able to kind of hang in there no matter what the economic environment is.
Yeah, totally. So you'll remember Mary Meeker, renowned analyst, and one of the things that she's famous for is sort of her chart that basically compares time spent by a consumer in various media channels relative to ad spend. And anytime there's kind of a delta between where consumers are spending their time and the ad spend, her forecast has always been, hey, that gap is going to be closed, that marketers will kind of move into that space. And I completely agree with that. And I think what we've seen is that AI has brought the consumer into this new channel. And right now, there's really no paid marketing in AI. Of course, that's going to change. But what you're going to see over the next few years is marketers moving into this new space to kind of close that gap. I think to your point, there is, regardless of the economic cycle, you see sort of marketing budgets kind of always exist. Maybe they're sort of scaling up, maybe they're scaling down, but especially in any sort of crisis, regardless of kind of the severity, brands need sales. No one is going to sort of walk away from their customer regardless of the economic climate. And so yeah, we think a lot about, making sure that brands are not just able to kind of, be protected and play defense regardless of the climate, but they also can pick up opportunities. One of the things that happens anytime that you see a new channel, and this was true of search, it was true of social, it was true of mobile, the early adopters, the brands that were playing offense, they picked up outsized gains because they moved faster than their competitors. They recognized the opportunity. They weren't just focused on risk mitigation. They were focused on what's the upside? What can we gain percentage points of market share here? Can we win new customers? How do we sort of turn this into a revenue driver for our business? And going back to your question earlier, I think, because we work with large blue chip brands, these are the most sophisticated marketers in the world. They have seen marketing cycles come and go, and they are very sober around, hey, what can we do with this one? How do we find opportunity for the business? How do we pick up percentage points against our competitors? And they'll do that regardless of cycle, for sure.
Well, one of the reasons I was really excited to have this conversation is that here's an example of looking at the landscape, looking at how quickly an existing, let's call it industry, and how it's going to be disruptive, and using the technology that you can build on top of, right, to kind of, go in and change the game. And to your point about not having to worry a whole heck of a lot about like the economic cycles, it really is just kind of keeping up with the technology, building on top of it, gaining trust, and then demonstrating to your blue chip brands that this is like how you can benefit from this technology. So like the return on investment is there.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what we're also seeing is that there is a, both from Wall Street, but also inside of these companies, there's a top-down mandate to move quickly and adopt AI right now. And that is causing these large corporations to really, move faster than I've ever seen them in my career. And so, I think that there is a sort of a permission slip that a lot of these big brands have to be a little bit more aggressive and take a more aggressive posture than maybe they historically have with this, new channel.
Alex Sherman, I appreciate you coming here. I hope we'll do it again.
Yeah.
Your insights, obviously, about the industry that you're disrupting, where all of this agentic AI is going. I'm taking the over in the meantime. And I know you don't care. I mean, it doesn't matter, like, to you guys.
I care.
No, but what I'm saying is, it's like, it's not the thing. If I'm not trusting Expedia's agent to go plan my trip anytime soon, it doesn't change your life, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right. So, well, listen, Alex, I really appreciate you being here. I hope we do it again.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.